Good afternoon and welcome to How to Submit a UEDA Awards of Excellence application, a webinar designed to provide support to institutions considering submitting an application for the 2020 UEDA Awards of Excellence program. My name is Frank Satil and I am the Deputy Director for UEDA and will be serving as your MC for today's webinar. The Awards of Excellence recognizes leading edge initiatives in university-based economic development and encourages their adoption among UEDA members. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping items. If you have a question, please use the chat feature in the right column of your Zoom window. We'll have an opportunity to answer these questions at the end of the presentation. If for some reason you're having technical difficulties, you can also use the chat feature. Everybody is muted except for our presenters throughout today's webinar, and further information about the Awards of Excellence program can be found at awards.universityeda.org. And as a reminder, and this is just announced today, because of the current situation involving COVID-19 and the activity on campuses and the shutdowns, the Awards of Excellence nomination deadline has been extended to June 1st. And there will be more about that as we discuss eligibility. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be emailed within the next few days. The purpose of today's, let me introduce our presenters. We have Margot Fliss. About UEDA, we're the leading national association for university-based economic development professionals. We provide value through news and information, resources, educational programming, and best practice sharing. Our current active initiatives are Foundations for Strategy and Practice, which we are continuing and has entered phase 2, which is metrics. We are consistently striving to increase value for our members. We are in the midst of implementation of a new CRM system, and we are growing and diversifying our membership base. Now on to our presenters. Margot Fliss is our Awards of Excellence Committee Chair from the University of Alaska Anchorage Business Enterprise Institute. And we also have Ellie Travis from Virginia Tech. She is currently finishing her PhD in evaluation and will share best practices for illustrating the impact of your projects through metrics. I will now turn the presentation over to Margot.
Thank you, Frank. Good afternoon, everybody. And good morning to some of you. It's morning up here in Alaska. I'm pleased that you could join us for this webinar on the UEDA Awards of Excellence program. We have a quick poll that we would like to do. So if you'll bear with us for just a moment, a poll should be popping up on all of your screens. Part of the metrics project that Frank just mentioned was starting to collect information on different aspects of the Awards of Excellence program. And so we're just going to give everybody a moment or two to answer the 2 questions. The poll should pop up on the front of your screen. And they're asking about if you are a member of UEDA and if you have ever applied for the Awards of Excellence program before. All right, thank you everybody for your participation. So it looks like we do have quite a few UEDA members, but we have some new folks with us as well. Welcome. And we have about half and half. Half the people on the call have applied for the Awards of Excellence program before, and half have not. So again, welcome to all of you. We're so glad you are able to join us on this webinar today. The purpose of this webinar is to help you really prepare and formulate your submission for the Awards of Excellence. So we're going to discuss a couple of things on this webinar. The awards process, including eligibility, the different categories, judging criteria, timeline, and what is expected of a finalist presentation. This webinar will also provide an opportunity for any questions you might have. And we're asking if you have any questions, just jot them down really quickly and we will get to those at the end of the presentation. And the whole webinar should last less than an hour. So before we begin, as Frank mentioned, we have moved the deadline for the Awards of Excellence. And we are just trying to be incredibly cognizant of what's going on at different campuses across the United States. I know that all of our institutions are dealing with this the best that they can, and many people have had to transition fully online. So with that in mind though, UEDA's activities in regards to COVID-19. The UEDA Summit is still on for this fall. We're exploring all options, but all options that involve having some type of conference this fall. You can register now. Actually, there's an early bird registration, and you would have up until August 15th to pay when you go to register for the summit. You can select pay by invoice when registering, so you don't have to pay right now. I know my institution is one where all travel's on lockdown right now, but that's a great option if you're still planning on joining us at the summit. And we will continue updating you on a regular basis as new information becomes available. So why should you apply? That's a great question. And there's a number of different reasons that we have found both the finalists and the winners get a lot of benefit out of this program. And some participants have received a number of different things, including recognition from your peers. So when you apply, the Awards of Excellence Committee actually selects who moves on from an applicant to a finalist. However, when you present at the summit, it is your peers that are voting for you to be the winner of that particular category. So you receive validation. Often a lot of the initiatives we see are really novel and impactful, and you get a lot of validation about the work that you're doing. Expanded access to grants and different resources and funding. I know that this is a big one for us. Having validation of your program is a great thing to put on future grant applications. Enrollment, we often see a lot of students are excited to see that their institution is engaged in things that are really innovative. Additional partners, this can be a great way to not only showcase the great work you might already be doing with partners, but also to help encourage new partners to come and work with you. And they like to see that, you know, your institution is really meaningfully engaged. And finally, reputation. The institution gets to showcase that it is doing really incredible work in the field of economic development and university-based economic development in particular. Some important dates, as we just mentioned, we have moved the deadline back to June 1st. We're trying to be as cognizant as possible of the fact that a lot of people's lives have changed pretty drastically, having to do all their classes online and things of that nature. So the deadline is now June 1st. The finalist notification will be July 1st. The finalist webinar will be in late August. So those who are selected to move on to be a finalist, we do another webinar for you, and that's really to go over a lot of the mechanics of what is expected in the presentation. And then the UEDA Annual Summit is going to be happening late in September. So September 21st and 22nd are when the finalist presentations would take place. And the awards banquet takes place on the evening of September 22nd. So eligibility, all non-UEDA members may nominate one project or initiative, for a $200 application fee per entry. UEDA members may nominate multiple projects at no cost. That's one of the benefits of being a member of UEDA. So if you are not a member of UEDA, we highly encourage you to look into that. That might be a great time to join this wonderful organization. Your project or initiative should be at least 24 months old. However, this is a guideline. We understand sometimes projects have been in the works for years, have a lot of partners and groundwork that have been done before maybe you've officially begun the work of the project. So that is a guideline. And that guideline is there so that you can talk a lot about showing the impacts that your program has done. If your initiative is not yet completed, or it was started after, July 1st, 2018, it should be at a stage where you can show significant progress and you can show benefits that you can actually measure or might be anticipating for the coming years. And the reason that we say this is it really helps make your application more competitive. you can resubmit an initiative or project that previously applied for an Awards of Excellence but was not a winner. However, if your project was a finalist and you want to resubmit, we ask that you really showcase how your project has changed and grown since you originally applied for an Awards of Excellence. You can submit more than one project. Actually, we encourage it. There is no limit on the number of projects, just the length of your application. And in Awards of Excellence, nominees will have the opportunity to expand the recognition and exposure of their work through a number of different things. And one thing that is really cool is we actually have a map on the UEDA website that showcases where finalists and winners have come from across the United States. And so that's a great way to look at maybe if you've submitted and won in the past, yours will be on there, but also other applications that might have come from your region. So UEDA's Framework for Higher Education and Economic Development. In 2015, UEDA jointly published the Higher Education Engagement and Economic Development Foundations for Strategy Practice with the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities Commission on Competitiveness, Innovation, and Economic Prosperity. And this groundbreaking document set forth a common definition for what is university economic development and engagement. And it set forward a set of principles to guide economic development and engagement in higher education, as well as a taxonomy of programs to assist practitioners and higher education officials in understanding and also communicating what constitutes a university-based economic development. So if you would like to review this document, you can look for it at foundations.universityeda.org. It's got a lot of great information in there. And we highly suggest if you're interested, you go check that out. So now on to the awards categories. We have 6 categories: talent, innovation, and place, and then the intersection of those. So talent includes the spectrum of knowledge transfer activities by which universities educate people, develop human capital for the 21st century knowledge economy. And this includes lifelong learning, both degree and non-degree programs, experiential education, discovery-based learning, things like that. Talent and innovation are projects and initiatives that synergistically look at the talent and innovation together to create innovators of many kinds. That's entrepreneurs, idea or product makers, and problem solvers. Entrepreneurship education projects and initiatives, and often experiential learning projects or initiatives fit well into this category. Innovation. So innovation begins with basic research and builds on knowledge creation, and that can encompass, knowledge transfer and application in ways that are really useful and relevant to your community and society at large. And so this category encompasses basic research, applied research, translational research, and industry contracted R&D and cooperative extension programs would fit well into this category. Innovation and place. So projects or initiatives that synergistically connect innovation and place. So that's the creation of physical places that attract and really build concentration of talent and a lot of innovators and entrepreneurs and knowledge communities. So this can be a specific site such as a university research or technology park, an incubator, accelerator, things like that, or a large community or region such as an innovation district. Place is defined as the many diverse ways in which institutions can make communities attractive and competitive to bring business and help grow entrepreneurship. Places where people really want to live, create, take jobs, raise their families, participate in civic life, age, and retire. Competitive and successful communities and regions are attentive to things like the health, education, environment, housing, safety, and entertainment needs of community members. So campuses and sites like research parks are great components. They would be great applicants for that particular category. And finally, talent and place. So talent and place initiatives look at, again, the synergistic connection between talent and place in ways that really enrich discourse and promote civic participation. So a few examples could be K-12 school improvement partnerships, local government training institutes, higher education involvement in regional government, economic development organizations, and community wellness projects or initiatives. So the judging criteria, this is always very important. There are 5 categories on which the applications are judged by the Awards of Excellence committee. Those are originality and creativity, impact, demonstrating excellence in leadership, collaboration, and strategic partnerships, replicability, scalability, and sustainability, and the strength of the overall application, and then the respective weights for each of those. So originality and creativity, to go a little bit more into these. Is the project new? Is it new and original, and is it contributing something new or original to your community or to society at large? And another way of looking at this is, does it produce an innovative way of thinking or doing something differently than maybe it's been done in the past? Is it a new type of project or initiative that can be used to expand UEDA's foundational taxonomy, or does it represent an important new innovation in a way to a more established project or initiative? How unique are the project's objective, structure, approach, strategy, and results? So again, you could be unique in any one of those ways. Maybe the approach for your project is incredibly unique. Maybe the strategies you use are incredibly unique, or maybe the results that you have are incredibly unique and original. So you could kind of focus on any one or all of those. And how is it really different from other similar projects or initiatives? That's what we think is important to focus on for originality and creativity. Impact. Do you have a clear logical plan to achieve the goals and results that you would like to see? And Ellie's going to talk a little bit more about this in just a few moments here. But what we think is incredibly important is, how are you demonstrating that you are doing what you said you set out to do? You're reaching the goals that you have, maybe reaching particular milestones. And does this application provide qualitative metrics, quantitative metrics that demonstrate you've had a significant impact on your community, or that's something that you're in the process of achieving? Leadership, collaboration, and strategic partnerships. What we are really interested in for this particular judging category is, how are you engaging with different facets of the community, different partners that you work with? Are you in a leadership role? Are you kind of equally running this program with other partners? We want to look at your role as the leader or convener in developing and implementing a project that maybe addresses a regional need. Can you describe how the stakeholders or partners were identified, consulted? Do you have a unique way in which you work with each other, in which you communicate, divvy up work? Those are all really interesting things that fellow UEDA members love to hear about. And did the project or initiative involve partnership with different partners? Could include regional economic developers, government, business, industry, nonprofits, other institutions of higher education, and other relevant collaborators. And what we're really looking for there is, how are you working with others? How did you approach that? And how are you looking to potentially grow the stakeholders that are engaged in your project? So replicability, scalability, and sustainability. This one, I think, is one that I personally find incredibly valuable. When I'm watching the Awards of Excellence presentations, I want to know, living up in Alaska, programs are often going to look really different from many other places down in the lower 48. So I want to know, how could this program be replicated up here in Alaska? That's just my 2 cents there. So can the insights, tools, and best practices from the project or initiative be duplicated by other institutions, either in your region or in anywhere else in the US, or in, we actually have some UEDA members from other countries as well. Can it be easily scaled up or down and or modified to reflect different regional or institutional contexts? Again, if you're from a large institution, can this be done at a small institution as well, or vice versa? Does the initiative have a business model that can sustain the initiative beyond its initial funding? That's a big thing, especially during tough times. How is this project able to sustain itself? And finally, overall, the overall criterion is obviously subjective, and it's an opportunity for the judges to score the projects based on individual opinions and the overall strength of the application. At the summit, the criteria is based, at least in part, on the quality of your presentation. So as we mentioned earlier, you are voted on by your fellow colleagues that are attending the conference. And so part of obviously your overall score is going to be based on how you did with your presentation. So as we mentioned previously, Ellie Travis from Virginia Tech has joined us to give us an overview of her work on evaluating impact, which is obviously incredibly valuable when you're preparing your nomination applications. So I want to turn things over to Ellie now.
Thanks, Margot. And thank you all for having me, being able to join you today virtually. So today I'm going to be talking specifically about a section of the application that's around identifying impacts. And I'm going to present to you sort of a deceptively simple framework that you can use to start and reflect on better understanding the impacts of the programs that you're working on, that you're potentially submitting as an award of excellence, and how you can begin systematically identifying those impacts so that you can present them. So the application, I just copy pasted here from the application, but there's a section of the application that says, please describe the initiatives. I guess you can read that yourself. The initiatives intended results and impacts and your plans to achieve these. It could include your time frame and your plan to track progress towards meeting those intended results. But what we often find in the actual awards of excellence presentations that people like to see not just your plan for measuring impact, but the impacts that you've had. And we find that a lot of presenters sometimes struggle because they don't think, you know, they're 2 years into a 5-year program and they haven't achieved the jobs or investment goals that they've already had, and they often get stuck about what their interim impacts are. Next slide. And so the additional piece of information that we'd like in the application is this simple table that explains your metrics, your target performance, the ultimate goal associated with that metric, the performance that you've achieved to date, and then the time period over which the actual performance is achieved. So the purpose of this is to let people whose programs might not be fully completed still talk about where they are in terms of their progress, but it's all related to this idea of metrics. And for me, metrics isn't a very helpful place to start. I think a more helpful place to start is thinking holistically about your program using an evaluation framework. So what is evaluation? Usually when I talk to groups, I start with this question because a lot of people have negative feelings and associations related to evaluation. They think it's an annoying activity that they do. It's some sort of form that they fill out at the end of a training program that gets filed in a drawer and never looked at again. But I tend to see, I'm sort of an evaluation evangelist, and I tend to see evaluation as a very positive activity that any organization can undertake at any point, and indeed should undertake in order to figure out how their program is working and the impact their program is having, and how they can be reflective about improving that program to really target and achieve the results that they'd like to in the community that they'd like to have those results for. My favorite definition of evaluation is from this famous evaluator named Michael Scriven. And so he states that evaluation is the systematic determination of merit, worth, and significance of something. So there's a lot of important words there. Seems a little bit simple, but the first thing I'd like to highlight is the word systematic. So I hear a lot of people saying that their program has impacts. It's really making a difference in the community, and I ask them, that's really great. I mean, what kind of impacts are you seeing, or how are you getting information about those? And they say, oh, well, you know, someone called me up and told me the program really made a difference to them. But that's anecdotal. And so they kind of get stuck with this idea of just anecdotal information showing what the impact is. And that anecdotal information is perfectly valid. That is a totally valid metric data point of the impact of your program. But if you want to elevate it to the status of evaluation of metrics, you need to be systematic about the collection of that anecdotal information. And the second part here is the merit, the worth, and significance. So for some people, those might be synonyms. For others, they might be different. But we really want to think with evaluation of what the merit is for whom, and who is it worth something to, and what is the significance, and what is our the community that we're looking for. Is this significant for us as an institution, as a small group? Is it significant for us as a university? Is it significant in the community that we're working in? Is it significant globally? So we want to, I keep coming back to this definition when I think about evaluation and metrics, because there's a lot here to think about. So we heard a lot about metrics already today, and metrics are just really simple. They're a data point, they're a measure, they're a number. They have a lot of implicit meaning for people because they're just numbers. So people can see a number of jobs created. If it's higher than it was last year, that's great. If we have additional investment, sure, that's fantastic. But metrics in the end are just data points and numbers, and a lot of their meaning is implicit. And in evaluation, what we want to do is look at the values that we have in our communities, in our universities, in our programs, and then attach them to metrics, and that's how we get evaluation. So metrics should never stand by themselves. We shouldn't just report metrics because they're things we already collect. That doesn't give them implicit value or meaning just because they can be counted. So we really want to think about the values. So when you're thinking about values, you want to think about the values that you hold, the ones that you're trying to promote in your program. You want to think about the program and think about what it means for people in your program to succeed, whether they're faculty members, whether they're students, whether they're community members. You want to think about the programs and think about who would benefit and exactly how they would benefit. So those are all ways to start thinking about these values. So my dissertation advisor is Tom Archibald, and he's coined this term called evaluative thinking. And I think evaluative thinking is a really great place for us to start when we're figuring out we have these metrics, we have these values, we have our program, what the heck do we do with this all? And so evaluative thinking comes in and gives us some answers. So evaluative thinking simply is critical thinking applied in the context of evaluation. So it's motivated by an attitude of inquisitiveness, a belief in the value of evidence, broadly defined evidence, that involves identifying assumptions, posing thoughtful questions, pursuing deeper understanding through reflection and perspective taking, and making informed decisions in preparation for action. So if you're in a meeting, or if you'd like to practice evaluative thinking in a meeting or a group you're in, these are things you might hear. So you might hear things like, why are we assuming this? How do we know? Who might be wrong? Why are we engaging partners in this? What evidence do we have for this? What's the thinking behind the way we do this? How does this element connect to our intended outcomes, which is often helpful when we're thinking about adding new activities to our program. Think about the outcomes and how does this connect? And also, do we have the right partners at the table to achieve this? So, we've talked about metrics, we've talked about values and evaluative thinking, and this is where we figure out how to put it all into practice. And I always like to start with a logic model. Some people have done logic models before. With my associate director is a longtime extension person, and he tells me he really dislikes logic models, or at least when we started, but now he's seeing the value of them. But logic models simply show our theory of change, why we think the program that we're doing is going to have an impact in the community. So here, and I think this is from an evaluation cartoonist named Fresh Spectrum, if you want to look him up. But here's a simplified logic model, right? Give us money and we all win. Here's another funny cartoon that I like, that you think you should be more explicit in step 2. So oftentimes with our programs, we spend a lot of time thinking about the activities and the ultimate results, but we have trouble thinking about what's happening in the middle. So with many of your programs that you're considering submitting for an Awards of Excellence, you might be in this middle phase here. So you might not have the intended outcomes or impacts that you'd like to see, but you still want to show the impacts. So what a logic model helps you do is better understand all of the intermediate, the short-term and medium-term outcomes that happen in between your activities and the ultimate effects that you want to see. So here is a description of a logic model. This is usually where I start. Sometimes it can be, if you like mind mapping, sometimes that's a good way to show it, but sometimes using this simple column format works. So what we do is we start a logic model with activities that could be broadly defined or more specific. We then add outputs, which are byproducts of these activities. You might see things, some sort of document that signifies that this activity took place. So it could be an attendance list, it could be a final report. If your participants are doing something in the course of an activity, those products could be an output. Your short-term outcomes are your earliest outcomes that are linked to activities. And so that relates to your participants themselves. So those are often changes in your participants' awareness, their knowledge, their motivations, their aspirations. Then we see medium-term outcomes. And so those are sustained changes in short-term outcomes. So we have the participants of our programs that might come out of a program with different knowledge or beliefs or motivations, but then the medium-term outcome is what they actually do with those. So we can't just assume that because somebody attends a workshop, they're going to learn something. So we got to first check to make sure they've learned something. And then once they've learned something, we can't be sure that they're going to apply something. So we really have to be explicit about what's happening along the continuum of our theory of change. So in terms of medium-term outcomes, we can look specifically at what happens with these program participants, but we can also look at what happens outside of the participant community. So if we have faculty members, for example, who are increasing their knowledge about community engagement activities, we could see a medium-term outcome being some sort of action that they take as a result of that, but it also could be them spreading those ideas to other faculty members that didn't participate in the program. That's also a medium-term outcome. And then the long-term outcomes and impacts are these ultimate effects that are connected to medium-term outcomes. They often occur beyond the individual or personal level, so it's not specifically what a faculty member did, but this is where things like our broad program impacts that we write in our grant applications would be, like jobs and investment and sustained collaboration, all of those big aspirational things that we'd like to see as a result of our programs in the long term belong in this long-term outcomes and impacts column. So I have an example logic model that I created with a group that I'm working with called Vibrant Virginia. And we were considering submitting this for an Awards of Excellence. I'll have to check with my my teammates to see if they're still interested in this, but it is only a year old, so maybe we want to wait an extra year. But I shared this with Margot a couple weeks ago, and she liked it, so I thought it could be a good example for us today. So the overall goal of Vibrant Virginia, it started out as a program called something around the Bridging the Urban-Rural Divide. In Virginia, like many of the states you're from, we have a big divide between urban and rural areas, and so we better want to understand that and increase connections between urban and rural communities. So not focus on the divide, but focus on the connections between us. So we have a series of activities that I put in this section of the logic model. So we have some seed-funded projects. Those are faculty-led projects in communities. We hold community conversations in 4 areas of Virginia, both urban and rural. We also, have campus conversations where we bring faculty members around a specific topic. And then we're also putting a book together. So what we decided as a result of all these activities, what do we think will be a short-term outcome? And these are things we can start to measure. So we expect that as a result of these activities, we see increases in community knowledge. We expect to see the community being motivated for action. We want to see the same on the faculty side. We'd like to see, or we expect to see, a collaborative attitude as a result of these activities, an identification of collaboration opportunities, and then there's some specific outputs and outcomes that are related to those seed-funded projects. So those are the short-term outcomes, many of which we've seen in our first year. In terms of medium-term outcomes, we want to look at networks. So we want to see a more pronounced and complex network of researchers and development practitioners interested in Virginia regions. We want to see the partnerships that we're forming between community and faculty being sustained beyond the life of Vibrant Virginia. And then we also want to see an increased number and quality of university projects and initiatives that are related to urban-rural concerns in Virginia. And then ultimately, these are sort of the vision, the mission of our program, is that we want increased connectedness between communities and Virginia Tech. We want to see connectedness between urban and rural regions, and then we want to see a more vibrant Virginia, exclamation point, because that's the point of our grant. So the next step here, so you've built a logic model for your program. Now let's get back to the metrics. So the first place that you can start is to look at the elements of your logic model and identify or match the metrics that you already collect to the individual elements of the model. So look at what data you're already collecting that matches those elements, and then look at the important questions that you have about the logic model and identify additional data that you would like to start systematically collecting. So here's an example of a simple map that we created. So we're interested in the geographic breadth and reach of Vibrant Virginia. So what we did is we simply mapped what we were doing, and it went into our midterm or our final report. So we have stars where all the community conversation locations are. We took attendance lists and asked people where they were from, so we included that in terms of the reach. And then we had these seed grant projects that I explained earlier, and we wanted to know where those are covered. So this, on a very simple map, shows us in the first year where Vibrant Virginia has reached. So this is important because we cover both urban and rural areas, but it's also helpful for us. This wouldn't necessarily be something that you want to highlight in the Awards of Excellence, or maybe you would, but this also helps us identify that there are swaths of Virginia that we haven't yet covered and we'd like to cover in the future. So that's another kind of helpful part of evaluation. Here's an additional data point. So we asked all of our, we sent an evaluation out, so a survey and I think some interview questions out to everybody who participated in these programs in order to better understand or identify the outcomes of these conversations. So we have a quote from someone who is a seed grantee, talked about with seed funding, we've been able to propel our project. We've leveraged this funding with several other grants. We continue to plan for a second annual meeting and submit an external grant. So if you look just at this quote and then you look back to our logic model, you'll see that in this simple quote, there's an indication that there's several different outcomes that we've already achieved. So if we layer this, if you're into qualitative research, if you want to code this according to the elements of the logic model, we can see that we've had an impact in terms of additional funding and sustained collaboration. And then the second one is a very simple, like, hey, thanks guys, quote. I enjoyed the opportunity to meet new stakeholders to form connections for future collaboration. So that is an indicator for our short-term outcomes, which is that there's motivation for collaboration, right? And then this, I think, is the last piece of data that we've collected already for our program in terms of connections made. So this is probably a little too lengthy for everybody to read, but we surveyed everybody who participated and asked what they did as after the program. And so again, you could go through all of these connections and code them and sort them according to where you think they fit in terms of metrics that associate with the elements of your logic model, and then show impacts that way. So we have here examples of continued engagement. We have some money here, for example. So we would anticipate that Vibrant Virginia would lead to additional funding opportunities, and we indeed helped someone at a seafood ag research and extension station secure a $3 million grant, which is an important impact of this program that was totally unintended, but really fits with our logic model. And there's different ideas here about how partners that have participated in these conversations have worked afterward, which is an indicator that the program that we're doing has this sort of sustained impact that we'd like to see. So we can qualify that, we can use quotes there and follow that along the way. But if we want quantitative measures, we could also look at the number of people who participated in the conversation that then connected with someone they met afterward as an indicator that we're really sustaining partnerships as a result of this activity. So just to recap, in terms of how you show your results and impacts, I would recommend that you first build or rebuild your logic model. A lot of programs already have them, but it's, I think for Vibrant Virginia, this is my 4th or 5th iteration of my logic model. And I have a logic model for our office as well. That's probably in its 10th iteration. It's always helpful to review and review again. You can use these evaluative thinking questions to then redo your logic model, to really think about the assumptions that underlie the elements of your model, who your stakeholders are, what your values are, what their values are, what should be included. Then you identify the most important elements and you can pose some questions. Evaluation questions are similar to research questions. Then identify data you already collect that can answer those questions. Those are metrics. And then you can, for those questions that you don't have data immediately to answer, use some simple research tools like surveying and interviewing. So systematically collect information that's going to answer these questions you have. And then, hold on one sec. I got 2 more. Okay, and then the last one, that's my favorite. Sit back, review your metrics. What are the explicit and implicit values inherent in those metrics and what's missing? So a lot of people think numbers don't have values, and I completely disagree, right? You want to make sure that the values inherent in your metrics are explicit, that you're saying why they matter. If you're talking about jobs, why, what's the context? What sort of jobs are we creating? Who are we creating these jobs for? What do these jobs help people do? So we really want to make those implicit values that are inherent in these metrics very explicit. And then I think in sharing those, you'll be able to connect better with your Awards of Excellence audience and really help people see the impacts that your program is having in the communities you're serving. Okay, I'll turn it over to you now, Margot.
Thank you so much, Ellie. And I wasn't trying to rush you there. So Ellie and I had chatted a while ago, and she actually led a presentation at the Awards, not the Awards of Excellence, excuse me, the UEDA Summit in Milwaukee, which was a couple of years ago now. And we just absolutely loved it. So we're so thankful that she was willing to come on this presentation. I think that we continually get questions on even programs that have been around for a long time and have a lot of metrics. What is the story behind those? And so I think this is a fantastic first step for marrying. I love that metrics and values is what equals evaluation, because if you just have a lot of metrics, but there's no story behind them, or they're not in alignment with the values of your organization, you know, it's kind of like, how are those meaningful? So thank you so much, Ellie. So we're going to have an opportunity for any questions that you might have for Ellie or for myself or for any of the UEDA team coming up here in just a moment. So now how to apply. So we have transitioned all of our applications online. Some of you, if you've applied in the past, it used to be a paper application. This online portal is so easy to use. It is where all of the applications go for summit presentations, lightning round presentations, and Award of Excellence presentations, excuse me. That's what the portal looks like there. So you can do everything online through that portal, and the portal can be found on the UEDA website. And it's just very easy to use. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. But the UEDA team have done a fantastic job of making that as simple as possible for still collecting all the information that we need. And again, that's what the application looks like there. And a quick reminder, again, the application deadline has been extended to June 1st. So don't forget to register for the annual summit. As we mentioned earlier, you can still register and get an early bird registration deal. And if your university or institution has put a freeze on travel like mine has, what you can do when you're checking out is select the invoice me option. And that gives up until August 15th, I believe it was, to be able to, you know, finish that invoice and get that all taken care of. So we've kept our group rates in 2020. So if you have more than 3 attendees that are going to register together, you will actually receive a 10% discount off the registration rate. I know that in my office, I had the chance to go to Savannah a couple of months ago, and it was absolutely fantastic. And my office is fighting over who's going to get a come to the summit this year. People are just really excited. And again, the summit theme for this year is the logistics of economic development, connecting talent, innovation, and place. So now we want to open things up for any questions that people might have.
I have a few, Margot, if I may, that have come in.
Absolutely, please.
First up, and I'm not surprised by this at all, what happens if the conference is canceled? So as we mentioned earlier, we have no intention of canceling the summit. It will go on in some form or fashion, and details will be shared as the information changes, which, as we all know, is happening on a daily basis. So the safety of our attendees is of utmost importance. So if it becomes feasible to attend in person, great. If we have to kind of do a hybrid, also good, but we are keeping our options open, and we will be having a conference.
And
second question. Oh, sorry.
Well, if I could follow up on that, Frank, really quickly. It's still a fantastic time to submit an Awards of Excellence. I would say right now up here in Alaska, we are meeting with our regional partners on a weekly basis. There's actually going to be a UEDA town hall on Thursday where my boss Nolan is going to be talking about, he's just done a fantastic job. So I think that looking at best practices and how we can help each other as we, you know, kind of weather this pandemic, and then how is the recovery going to look like afterwards? Now more than ever, I think that connecting with colleagues, not only in your region, but across the United States, is still incredibly valuable to a lot of us. So we still encourage you, highly encourage you to submit your excellent programs. We want to hear about what you're doing.
All right, next question. How will finalists be able to present for the awards if they are under travel restrictions? So if we are able to hold the summit in person in Savannah, we are, of course, are going to be very flexible when it comes to awards presenters and their ability to attend. Whether it's a travel ban or a funding shortfall or any other challenge, we will do everything we can to accommodate all attendees, including awards finalists, using any and all technology at our disposal to assist you. A couple more. This is actually kind of the same question phrased twice. If the summit is held in person, will awards finalists who are able to attend have an advantage over those who must present virtually? And then a similar question is, in the event that finalists are unable to attend in person, how can they be judged against teams that have the ability to present face-to-face? In answer to both of those questions, the committee will ensure that there is no judging distinction between those who are in person and those who are virtual. We all understand these trying times that we're in. And as I mentioned earlier about attendance, we will do our utmost, and we will have a level playing field, and your inability to travel based on your institution's guidelines will not impact in any way your ability to present or your ability to be judged fairly.
Frank, can I add something to that really quickly?
Sure.
One of the reasons that we asked Ellie to present on this webinar was that I think many of us who have attended a UEDA Summit before know that you just see some presentations that just knock it out of the park. They are just absolutely fantastic. And one thing a lot of the committee members, as we've talked about this, we have found is that when you were able to tell the story, not only about your program, but about impacts, right? A lot of what Ellie talked about today, that translates well. Whether that's, you know, if we do end up having to have virtual presentations or in-person presentations can still continue. I think that focusing on putting forward the best application possible, and then if you're selected as a finalist, we, again, as I mentioned, if you're a finalist, you attend another webinar that talks about how to do your absolute best presentation. And we will be sure to have more information in there if that's what ends up happening. But I think that one thing I have found personally, attending I think 5 summits now, is that when you were able to tell the story about the impacts and how your program is really changing your community or your region or, you know, life for students at your institution. I think that's still incredibly powerful. And that's what I would focus on, is making the best presentation possible. But also we obviously will ensure that there's no differentiation between virtual or in-person presentations, if that's what it's come to.
Well, that's the questions I had, Margot. I don't know if there are any more coming in right now or not. We're getting close to the end of our hour. So I'm going to just remind everybody of the dates here. June 1st is the nomination deadline, extended from May 1st, as we all know. July 1st, finalist notification. The finalist webinar will occur in late August. And at the annual summit in Savannah on the 21st and 22nd of September will be the summit finalist presentations. And the awards banquet will take place on the evening of September 22nd. Just to mention, we do always have some other opportunities for UEDA members and collaborators. We do have a webinar coming up next Wednesday or Tuesday, excuse me, at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, 10 a.m. Pacific, about the IEP designation program with APLU, Innovation and Economic Prosperity. This will be an introductory webinar about the IEP program and the benefits of it and how to join the current cohort and what's involved. And we invite you to register for that. All UEDA events can be found at ueda.eventbrite.com. So Margot, if you have any final words?
Thank you.
No,
okay, I do. I'm so sorry. I was muted there. I was having technology issues. I'm going to thank everybody so much for presenting today. Thank you, Ellie. Thank you, UEDA team, for making this possible. I also know many of my colleagues really wanted to be here today, but had other conflicts. So as Frank mentioned, there will be a recording. If you know other people who'd be great Awards of Excellence applicants, please encourage them to watch the recording. It gives a lot of great information. And thank you all for joining us today.